Welcome to this episode of The Build-Up, presented by the Florida Home Builders Association, serving up fresh perspectives on politics, building, and beyond.
Hi, welcome to The Build-Up, the podcast for the Florida Home Builders Association. I'm John Riddle. I am the Vice President of Turning Leaf Custom Homes. We're a custom builder located in Sanford, Florida. And today, Ryan, I have to tell you, before you get into your introductions, that I am very much excited about talking with our guest. I've known him for a number of years. He has been the driving force behind our local HBA chapter, and I've watched from afar and have been admiring the way he's built his business. And I'm hoping today we can talk a lot about his success and how he has built up his company to be a powerhouse in the Southeast.
Thanks, John. I'm Ryan Benson. I'm your co-host. I'm president of the Florida Home Builders Association and co-owner of A. Vernon Allen Builder in Naples and Sanibel. Our guest today, John, and thank you for setting this up. Tony has transformed his company, ODC, over a decade into a powerhouse of shell construction, and then recently sold the company. So we're gonna bring Tony in and talk to him about his journey, how he got there, the philosophy behind his organization. So I'm really excited to have with us today Tony Hartsgrove from ODC.
Hey, how are you? Here I am.
There he is. Hey, Tony. Good morning.
Hey, good to see you guys.
Good to see you. So, Tony, and in preparing for this interview, and I'm really excited to have you on today. I listened to some of the other interviews with, less known podcasts other than ours, but still, you were by far the best interviews I heard on their shows. And you had gone into your early journey and then the most recently through the acquisition process. I want to understand with you that middle part, right? So you worked with places before ODC. How did you get into the business before you were afforded the opportunity to grow ODC into what it was?
Yeah. So for me, I got out of college with basically like $100 and a Honda Accord, like is what I had when I got out, and so I ended up answering an ad for a warranty position at Lennar Homes in '97, and really thought the ad was like a gimmick. I thought they were going to have me like selling homes door to door or something, because I had never actually, I don't think, lived in a home. I'd always lived in apartments my whole life. And so, anyway, started off with Lennar in '97 in warranty, and what the director of construction was trying to do in '97 was hire kids out of college who he thought would hustle, and had sort of the idea to kind of come up with process-driven ways to change the business, not just know how they've been framing homes for the last 30 years. And so I was part of there was about 20 of us over the, kind of late 90s that were hired into this program. It was kind of a management training program. We started with warranty, and I ended up doing kind of purchasing and superintendent and all that sorts of things. And like I said, really it was, hey, we want you to learn about the industry, but we want you to kind of talk to us about what you think could improve. And so it was a really great training ground for me to do that. And I was with Lennar for almost 7 years. And then the market kind of boomed, and I ended up getting kind of a bunch of jobs I wasn't qualified to do, because the market, everybody talks about the crash, but we all ended up with these jobs that were well above our responsibility in the boom as well. Because, you can't, despite what people think, you can't have a crash without a boom.
I mean, that's it. On that, you've mentioned before struggling with the imposter syndrome. So how did you work for that? What advice do you give to leaders who are growing into big roles before they're ready for it?
Yeah, we're getting right into it, huh? Imposter syndrome. 3 minutes into the interview, we're going imposter syndrome. I love it. Yeah, I mean, I think, there's different, the imposter syndrome can be kind of like this ominous term that like makes it sound like you're, should be seeing a shrink, or that you have no idea. But if you break it down, it's really just, can you believe that you are enough to do a position? Your experiences prepare you for a situation, and sometimes they don't. And then when they don't, how do you make up that gap? Right. And so some people make up that gap with insecurity, and some people make up that gap with all kinds of chips on their shoulder. And I've kind of done all of those, right? Just like anybody, there's been times in my life where, I'm smart and I have a pretty good drive to work and I care. So you end up kind of getting jobs when that happens. If you have a good work ethic, you're smart and you kind of can read the room, you're going to end up getting some jobs, I think. And so what do you do when you get those? Do you start to say, hey, I need to treat this like I have a chip on my shoulder because of all the things that have happened to me in life? Or do you say, hey, this is a fresh start? I'd like to tell you that, like, as soon as I got some sort of management position at Lennar or any of the other companies like Pulte I had, that I just put all that away. But, it's like anything. I think it ends up sort of kind of coming down to the Gladwell 10,000 hour rule. Like,
Yeah.
you end up getting reps with managing people, and you're getting reps and you do things and they either work or they don't. And then you have to sort of be self-aware enough to know when something doesn't work and then start to sort of recalibrate the process. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I answered your question or evaded your question, but,
you did answer it. And going to working for a national builder, and I have before too, and there's a culture component to that, right? And getting those 10,000 hours that you mentioned to get into the business, but you're also learning cultures, what's good and bad from that. When you went to ODC, and you've mentioned this culture of the organization, but it sounds like you've created a lot of that at ODC. How did your influence from the cultures of the national builders, and I, having worked for them, good and bad, influence the way that you created the culture and what you wanted ODC to be?
Yeah, that's a lot. So, I think what you learn in business, the two of the biggest things that I sort of took away from kind of working, we'll call a corporate environment, is you sort of have to answer two questions for the employees, because you may employ someone, but they have to choose to work for you. And so, like, just like I just, this may be off topic, but I remember during COVID, there was a time when Ron DeSantis was doing an interview and he said, hey, we can come up with all the laws we want, but sooner or later you're either going to put up with them or you're not. And the same thing kind of applies to an employee, right? Like, you can come up with all the things you want, and either they're going to believe in it or they're not. If they don't believe in it, they have two choices. They can quit, which is actually the better option, or they can stay and quit. And you have to kind of realize that the employee can do that, right? And they have the ability to either kind of give you their best or not. So, and again, this comes down to kind of really doing some self-aware. So back to the kind of the two big lessons. The two big lessons were kind of showing the employee the why of why we're trying to do things. Like, what is the why of the goal we're trying to accomplish? And, like, can you get behind that? And then also, what timeline are we trying to make money, right? Because every business is, I mean, the goal of business is not to make profit. The goal of business is to stay in business. And then every once in a while, when you can, you make a profit. But the only way you're going to do any of those things is if the employees believe in what you're doing, right? There's just no way around it. You can, for a short term, you can kind of, like, whip them into shape, but that's just not a long-term solution. So you really got to get into this concept of, like, hey, let's talk about our why. Let's talk about why we're pushing and why we're trying to do these things. And then let's assess the goal based on the kind of timeline. Because if we're trying to make the most amount of money we can today, then that's a set of decisions. If we're trying to make the most amount of money this month, that's a set of decisions that are different than today. And then if it's this year, or if it's the next 3 years, or if it's the next 5 years, as long as you can kind of get to a baseline where you're staying in business, you got to sort of set the company up to decide how long a timeline is with which you're making money, because there are all sorts of different decisions that are involved with that.
Yeah, so you talked about, we started getting into the why, and I know there's a lot more behind your why, Tony. I've had several road trips with you, and I've learned a lot just riding with you. But let's talk to our listeners about the what. So we'll kind of go back. Like, what is ODC? Shell contractor, we understand sort of the term, but tell us what ODC is and what are the functions that you provide?
Yeah, so over the years, what I think has happened to subcontracting is people get defined by the task they're completing. So you're a custom builder. Well, you're providing shelter for someone, and so if you can kind of get it back. So we do our current scopes of work. We do the kind of slab. We do block, which is only really from Orlando south. The rest of the United States doesn't really do masonry construction, and we do framing of the home for production builders. Those are our kind of current big scopes. What we think we are, and so people have come to call that the shell contractor, because those three things redound to the shell of a home. And so the common thing is you guys are a shell contractor. We don't really believe that. We believe that we're a logistics solution provider for production builders. And what that means is the builders don't have a workforce. They buy land. They don't have any labor, and so they subcontract all of the different labor with which it takes to build a home. And so sometimes what they need is people who can get labor efficiently, because not everybody can. And so they're trying to build the home as quickly as possible. Sometimes they need someone who can do it as inexpensively as possible. And so because it sort of doesn't matter to them if it takes a little bit longer to build, because the market is such that they can't sell the home unless they can get to a kind of a price point. We really try to protect ourselves into not pigeonholing ourselves into kind of like we're a shell contractor or we're a concrete guy or we're a framer. We think we provide the logistics. We try to be the most efficient we can at getting labor and materials to the job for the particular scopes that a builder contracts us. And we try to do it as efficiently as possible when they need efficiency, or as inexpensively as possible when they're kind of focused on price. Happens to be the market right now is very price driven. In 22, it was very capacity driven. And so the reason we've been able to grow at the rate we've been able to grow is because we recognize that not every market, you're not trying to solve the same problem all of the time. So that's what I would say is the what.
And speaking about your growth, so if I understand correctly, you started in Orlando, right? That's where the basis of operation is, and now you've expanded across Florida, and you're throughout the Southeast. Where are your markets that you're providing logistical support to?
Yeah, so the original company was called Orlando Decorative Concrete in 2011, and it was me and two other partners. That company did about $20 million in revenue in 2011. And we did primarily just the concrete and the masonry. I mean, there was a smattering of frame and that's it. And really just the Orlando market. And so today we're kind of throughout the state of Florida. We don't go any more south than Port St. Lucie as far as in the Miami area. And then we're not really in the Panhandle. But I would say we're in kind of all of the rest of the major markets in Florida. And we do, like I said, currently we do the concrete, masonry, and framing. And then we're also in the Carolinas where we do Charlotte, Myrtle Beach, and a little bit of Asheville, and a little in Raleigh as well. And so this year we're on track to do about 450 million in revenue. I think we'll start somewhere between 12 and 13,000 houses. So we're basically trying to do about 50 plus houses a business day.
And if you go back, you said you acquired the company with two partners. Are they active, or were they active in the business, or were they financing Tony to go in and take over this operation?
Yeah, so originally Zach Merriman, Isaac Litsky, and then I was a minority partner that came on board. Actually, I wasn't a partner until October of 11, and that's probably a story for like a beer or something with us. But Zach was not involved in the business day to day early on. Isaac was the CEO, and I was sort of the operations and kind of sales of the business. And then that's how we were until about 2016 or 17. And then I took over as CEO. Isaac moved on and was not involved with the business. And Zach and I ended up kind of involved kind of day to day, and Isaac was less involved. And that's how it stood until last August when we were acquired by Synergos, which is ultimately owned by a Japanese company called Asahi Kasei.
Yeah, so let's jump right into that, Tony. So what made that, like, what about that partnership made so much sense for you to go ahead and join forces with them?
Yeah, well, you end up saying, hey, you had one company from Japan. Asahi Kasei acquire us, and so you end up kind of categorizing all companies because of your experience with one company. So I want to make sure that I'm not doing that. But I will say that that company has been just a pleasure to work with. The people of that organization care. They care about not just like today's profit, but what the vision is and that sort of thing. They own a company called Synergos, and Synergos is a holding company out of Arizona that owns a bunch of different subcontractors that are in the same space as ODC. So they own 4 or 5 in Arizona that are either concrete, HVAC, framing, and then they own a big company in Las Vegas called Focus Companies, which does all of the sort of the framing, the slab. Remember, people don't really do masonry everywhere else, and then they do the MEPs, HVAC. In Nevada, they don't do HVAC, but they do plumbing and electrical.
Okay.
And that company is who I kind of deal with mostly. So I'm currently the COO of that company over the East Coast, and then I'm the CEO of ODC, which is the only company they own on the East Coast. And so I report to Rich Gallagher, who's the CEO of Synergos, and really it's honestly just been a pleasure. And I'm not saying this because I kind of like feel like he's going to end up watching it, and I need points or any of that kind of stuff. They just share the same vision. I mean, we
Yeah.
want to have the urgency to make as much money and to grow the business as much as possible, but the job is to kind of evaluate based on the market what's the right timeline for. And this is, I'll say it a million times because I think it's just critical to our thing. What is the right timeline for making money? And if you can get a timeline on what the right time to make money is, I think you can kind of partner up and be success and just have honest conversations. And we don't always have to agree. We just have to kind of like understand what it is and then kind of move on. So
Were you at a point where you were looking to be acquired to sell the organization, or did it come up by them approaching you, or were you shopping, different prospective suitors?
yeah, we did a process in 23. Obviously, 22 was a big growth year for us with the supply chain shortage. What we recognized in 22 was that with supplies being shortened, we were better than everybody else at getting supplies, and so that resulted in us almost doubling. We went from almost like 160 million to like 380 million between 21 and 22. And it was the right time to kind of run a process and kind of plus our systems had really kind of come into play, and we thought we could offer ourselves not just as a contractor but like as sort of a systems organization. We had all sorts of private equity companies talk to us, and every single time they would ask, what are you going to do if there's another crash? I would say, I don't know. We also don't have like a plan if a meteor hits. But if there is a crash, I'll be excited because that will have meant that there was a boom beforehand or whatever. And so we'll have decided, since we had a boom before, that we could save money and deal with the crash or whatever. Anyway, so they just really didn't understand the business and didn't really understand what, like, the concept of what is a timeline to make money. And so but we ended up meeting up with Synergos, and they just had the very similar kind of philosophies as us, and their idea is to be able to kind of acquire companies and put them under ODC and be able to grow with companies kind of being under ODC. So that'll be the next phase for ODC. Maybe not this year, but like at some point we'll start kind of that acquisition process and start delving into some different scopes of work.
Yeah, they're one of the systems that I believe I'm aware of, Crew Suite, right? That's your internal tracking system and
Yeah.
software system. Yeah, talk to us about that because that's interesting. I remember writing, I think we're going to Tallahassee for legislative visits, and you were showing me on a phone or some instant tracking of yardage of concrete and the amount of lumber that was being done, and I'm in the back seat with you, and it's like instantly updating, which was impressive as heck. But it was that kind of the start of Crew Suite.
Yeah, this is where I usually like to give a shout out to Isaac, the original partner. Isaac was a math major at Harvard, and he was kind of insistent that we had sort of an arm of our company, even when we were a $20 million company, that was kind of like very focused on the technology side. And so that just sort of exploded. We have, I think, 4 or 5 full-time software developers at ODC, and we constantly are fine-tuning. Our system is designed to, as you say, have constant information about the job and make us as efficient as we can to get to the job. And that's super important, and it's proved to be a differentiator among ODC from other guys. What I've noticed as CEO is that we also really focus on the amount of data that comes out of that system. In other words, knowing exactly when we're late on jobs, exactly why we're late on jobs, exactly when a job is profitable, not profitable, why it's not profitable. And that type of data, and really kind of like a culture of everybody kind of relying on data, not just on their gut, has allowed, I believe, kind of been one of the factors that have allowed us to grow, because we can, if a customer needs us to get to a number, we know what number we can be at to be successful. We're not just like, well, I've never done it at that price before, or, and we also know when we can't, and so we're able to kind of take risks on price that some other people aren't, because we exactly know the right number. And we're also able to not take a risk on price and say no when it's time. But then also our customers appreciate the amount of information that we've retained about the job. And so our system does a good job of making sure efficiencies in that. And then just lastly, because a lot of people say, well, why don't you just sell the system? It sounds great and all that. But you have to instill a culture that will use the system. When I was at all kinds of different home builders, they all had great kind of software, but you have to kind of sort of have a culture that mandates that everybody sort of buys into the software. And then when the software isn't working efficiently for the employee, you have to invest the time and people necessary to kind of fix it.
When you were being acquired, how important was that software component? Because I've, other people I know that sold their companies, or people that have acquired companies. When you have a software like that, the data is a lot of what a suitor is buying. And in your case, how big of a part was that to be able to say, hey, these guys have this software, and if you can get everyone on board with it, the information that we're able to receive, we could spread this to the 4 other companies that we have doing the same thing. How big a part of the acquisition was that?
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, we kind of have like 10 core principles that we're pretty focused on. But I guess 3 of the biggest ones are sort of, don't be a jerk, we're focused on the data, and count on change. And I think as they realized how much we live that we rely on data, and that we're willing to change because of what the data is telling us. Because, in the construction industry, you just end up with a lot of people that are like, this is the way we've always done it. And I think when we were able to kind of like let them know that we don't just do things the way we've always done it, we're constantly sort of looking for ways to innovate and disrupt, I think that was very attractive to them. And then the idea that is exciting to them is us then bringing in another company and having that company integrate with us, not just run on its own, but like a world where, an MEP company would come in and like not just be the MEP company, but also like get into can we adapt them to our culture?
Yeah. And I do want to thank you for using the word jerk instead of what it really says in your thing, because our Apple status can remain family friendly by not using what I've heard you use that description on other places. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I
I
think
just want to know
the most John's ever heard me speak without using that word.
Well, yeah, and I'm gonna bait him a little bit. Does ODC have a definition of jerk? I want to make sure, Tony, as a client, that I don't fall into that.
Yeah, it's sort of like the Supreme Court's definition of obscenity. You don't know what it is, but you know it when you see it.
Perfect. All right.
I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it.
All right. Well, you'll let me know if I cross the line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll give the shout out to you guys for GOBA. So I'll do a GOBA geared question here for you. You were VP and then eventually president of the Greater Orlando Builders Association. How did those roles with the association influence your outlook on our industry and long-term needs?
Yeah. I was John's JD Vance, actually. So
Yeah. I quickly learned
I
I
mean,
was being overwhelmed, rightfully
yeah,
so.
he he was my Trump, and I was his JD Vance. That's a better way of saying it. Look, Goba, particularly in Orlando, really has leaned in to the members to kind of like operate more efficiently. I think I got on the board, has to be, 10, 12 years ago, and or something like that. And one of the things that I kind of asked of Goba was that they listen to us and understand that we're business owners generally, or business leaders. And if you'll listen in to us, that we can give you kind of some insights on not just, I would say not for profit, but if you can run it to kind of be as efficiently as possible, then your why, which is the giving back to the community or the builders, you'll have more ability to do that. And I give credit to Chastity, and I give credit to everybody kind of at Goba, because they really leaned into that. And today that organization runs very smoothly and very efficiently. And I think it's probably, I mean, I don't know. I guess I only know them, but I can't imagine that there's many more efficiently run builders associations, at least in the state of Florida. And really, just them allowing us to not just say, hey, we're taking off of our business leader hat and putting on our not-for-profit hat, but actually kind of like running the business like in a world of like efficiently, and like revenue actually matters, because the more revenue you get, the more you can help the community, and like and like just actually just saying the word revenue, and it's not just acting like it's a dirty word or whatever. And so I've really enjoyed my time at Goba. I think my influence at Goba, I think will have an interesting perspective retrospect, because I don't think it's been like me, doing speeches and all that, but I've done a lot of behind the scenes work there that I'm pretty proud of.
Well, and it is important for our listeners to understand the associations, the work they do with advocacy, especially with all the things our industry faces day to day. So when we as an industry and business owner come forward and we're trying to address things, and this is leading to my next question, like workforce development and skilled labor. And without the associations jumping on board and creating programs and things like that, it'd be dependent on the individual companies themselves, but they come together and do it. How do you address the labor shortage issue, or say the moving target of labor shortage? One day there might be a policy you hear and it's a problem. The next day the policy reverses and it's not. Depending on where we are in the economic cycle. So what do you guys do to address that moving target with so many people?
Yeah, a couple things there. I mean, when you're working with an association like the Builders Association, you have kind of a choice. You're going to give them your time, your talent, or your treasure, right? And I honestly just didn't have the time for Goba. So what I did is, we had treasure, we had money, because our it just happens that our revenue is so big, because our ticket with the builder is so big that just generates just more dollars. And then I just chose to kind of impart upon them as much leadership as I could with the time that I had, and say, hey, use this leadership in the industry. And so, but particularly on your question on and also, hey, can we reframe the question? So this labor shortage, I don't know if you'll agree with my view on it or not, but the biggest issue that I have with the labor shortage question is that everybody just wants to throw people at it. So in other words, it's, hey, let's get kids that aren't supposed to go to college into trade school. Love it. But why don't we also talk to people about using labor more efficiently? And so the example I use is, everybody in the world's had like a remodel project done, and watched like with almost like horror at the way that they do the kind of labor, they manage the labor. But then they'll just sort of be able to have this whammy of, there's a labor shortage or whatever. And it's like, no, I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is there's a lack of organized management of labor. And everybody just wants to, and so if you could just wave a wand and everybody was as efficient as possible in the way they used labor, would we have a labor shortage?
Yeah, I agree. We wouldn't. No, if everything was run efficiently, that's a great point, and I hadn't thought of it from that perspective before, but that has merit.
So there's plenty of people out there that are out trying to drive education as far as like, hey, people that aren't, people that are better off, that are kind of like trying to get to college, and the better world for them is like in trade school. And there's plenty of that. There's a lot of education on that, and I support and like will kind of talk to anybody about that we need more kind of workers in the world, and that needs to be like, and it's not just we need more, we need that needs to have more status, like if you're a butcher in England, you actually can be proud of being a butcher in England, but if you're a butcher in America, you're sort of like you're not a lawyer or something like that. And so like actually kind of talking about what the world looks like to be proud of the jobs that aren't have the same sort of esteem as others, but also talking to companies about actually trying to figure out how to efficiently treat employees and labor so that we don't waste it, and if we did that, I think we could tackle the problem. But we don't. I don't actually see any steam behind that. It's just, let's just do things the way we've been doing things 30 years for 30 years. Let's just schedule 9 guys when we only needed 6, or let's just throw this at it, or let's just text someone the night before that they're supposed to have a job tomorrow or whatever, and then just decide there's not enough labor in the world. I reject that.
Yeah, I get that, and we're an industry that lags technology. I mean, it's one where when I came out of college, I actually graduated with an information technology degree in it. And looking at this industry, it seemed, say, simple in the way that, well, let's look and see what every other industry is doing, and if we implement some of that in what we're doing, because we just need to catch up to everyone else. We're always lagging in it.
Yeah.
And I saw that too working with a production builder. Now they were normally ahead of the curve as far as smaller builders, but my time with one of I'll call it the nationals, is one of the nationals. Their advantage was implementing technology, even though it was still lagging from other industries. I'm curious your work with all the different national builders. You had the experience at Lennar. I had experience at K-Hub, and then, I mean, so different. I'm kind of jealous that you got to see inside the operations of all these different national builders. Like, how were they different? What's that like? And
Yeah,
don't
I
name
mean,
names to like ruin anybody as far as like,
yeah,
hey, these guys are a
yeah,
dumpster fire, but yeah, just
yeah.
in general.
Yeah, I mean, again, I come down to this concept of culture versus technology. And so you can work on technology, but if you don't have a culture to use it, and then you end up with just sort of a free for all. And so that was sort of consistent with all the different builders that I have. It's just, and remember, to be fair, the last time I worked for a builder was in '09. So now it's getting to be 16 years ago, um, that since I worked for a national builder or whatever.
I'm saying now, though, you get to see inside, being ODC, working for these
Oh
guys,
yeah,
you
yeah,
get
yeah,
glimpses of the different organizations. Was where I was going.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it just comes down to, I mean, technology is important, but technology without leadership and culture is kind of useless. And so if I see it, there's a lot of technology being adapted to these companies, but they just, what I have noticed with a lot of the big builders is very few of them really kind of really promote from within. And so they end up kind of churning through. I will tell you, the number one builder for promoting from within, without question, is D.R. Horton. I mean, they just do a really good job of giving every single person a chance to kind of get as high up as they can in that industry. That doesn't mean I'm saying they're better than any other builder. I'm just saying in that aspect, they are kind of head and shoulders above everybody else.
That's
But
good to know.
and
This
and
podcast brought to you by D.R. Horton, America's builder. Sorry. Yeah, no, that's good though.
hopefully, yeah, hopefully, but they just do. I mean, they're just
Yeah.
you can get into that organization and it's just super clear. But I will say that a lot of the builders have really done a good job of kind of working on the schedule and the technology and getting it all out. I would say what they're still challenged to do is have a culture with which they sort of mandate that people use that. Because of the crash and then all the different things, what you end up with at most builders is every single one of them has had some sort of, your employees have worked for 3 or 4 different builders, and you end up with this hodgepodge of side systems at the builder that worked for them at brand X, Y or whatever. And so they don't necessarily a lot of times commit to the individual program that they have. And so when you do that, it just kind of takes away. So everybody wants to talk about technology, and I don't even think it matters in the home building industry or whatever. But if you focus on technology but don't kind of work on the culture of like sort of that technology working for the lowest level employee, then you're just not going to get much. And I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
Well,
You
well,
did.
what is the common trait, Tony, that you think makes a successful partnership with ODC with one of or many of these volume builders? Is there something specific that you see in all your successes with them that they each do or each have?
yeah, I mean, everyone is different, and so we kind of approach our relationship with the builders in kind of 3 different ways. One, we're solving a problem for them. And again, mostly that's just trying to logistically get labor and material to the job. 2, we want to make sure that we have a relationship with the builder. In other words, relationships in this industry actually really matter. And we don't just want the relationships to just kind of happen. We sort of legislate the relationship. Like we want there to be meetings with our guys. We want to get feedback from them. We want to understand constantly what we're doing wrong or right. And so, it's not enough for me to kind of meet with a division president and sort of him say, "Hey, I love what you guys are doing." Like every level of our organization needs to have a relationship with every level of the builder organization. And that needs to be intentional, right? Like not just if my guy happens to be a good guy and their guy happens to be a good guy, they can be friends. And they don't always have to be friends, but there has to be at least a professional relationship that is mandated through kind of constant communication. Our guys are supposed to kind of call once a day, the guys at the lower level. So because that we want to make sure that at least there was a chance for them to communicate every day. And so just lots of different ways of sort of saying, hey, it's not just about solving the problem, but also making sure that we're managing all the different relationships.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And then there's price. Yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, production builders are constrained by they're needing to be the most efficient price as possible, and their job to keep their job, they're constantly trying to commoditize the subcontractor. And so what does that mean? So if this framer is 9 cents and this framer is 8 cents and they're the same thing, then I'll go with the 8 cents framer or whatever, because then I can provide the best value for my employee. And so if we're needing to be the 9 cents instead of the 8 cents, we need to kind of make sure we understand what the value proposition between 8 and 9 cents is to give that to them. And if and most times in an economy like this, it's very challenging to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, on the relationship side, I know that's important for you. And going back to our FHBA, our chapters across the state, you don't hesitate, from what I understand, of joining a local HBA chapter and immediately getting in there, making an impact and make sure ODC is known and then building relationships with those builders. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, we have what we call a game plan, and our game plan in every market is to partner up with the biggest builders association there and be as prevalent with that builder association as possible. And why do we do that? Some people think it's because we're trying to sort of be flashy or whatever. But at the end of the day, when you do all 3 scopes of work with ODC, it's like around a $50,000 to $60,000 ticket. So if you're doing a roofing scope of work, that might be a $12,000 ticket. And so we're in a situation where we're generating a ton of revenue. And even if we make a small percent, it ends up being a decent amount of dollars. And so we want to give back to the different builders associations, and we feel like that shows the builders that we're investing in the community and that we're investing in the relationships of those different things. And so, and then we're actually sort of trying to teach those different builders associations a lot of like what GOBA does, because one of the things that I think I've been helpful at Agoba is that not just being a place of advocacy, but a place of networking. And so a place that people can kind of come together and commiserate or strategize about the industry. And so over the last 3 or 4 years, we've really ramped up our efforts statewide to be involved with different builders associations, and but it's not just by accident, and it's not just, oh, we like the one in Tampa. If we're in a market, we're going to partner with the biggest builders association, even if Chastity gets a little jealous.
Yeah. Well, and then going back, advocacy is networking. In my opinion, I mean, that's what makes it so successful with what we do on the state level with FHBA and in our own home chapter at GOBA. And many of the other chapters across our state do it just as successful. They network, their builders get involved, they network with the right people, and then they have an impact when we do need to advocate to let a legislative member know that, hey, this is not working the way we need it to work, or we need you to look at it in a different perspective. So it's critically important.
Yeah, and you don't really get a lot of time with people, right? We're all busy, we're all building homes and working, and we all have families and lives. And so, you can try to communicate through work, or sometimes you can do some stuff in social settings if people want to do that. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to get time to kind of meet with the different customers to kind of to really kind of talk about advocacy or what's going on in the industry, it really just turns out that the Builders Association is just the most logical and ready place to do that.
Yeah, no question. So let's change tide a little bit because we've had a great conversation. We can go on a lot longer, I'm sure, but let's talk a little bit about your looking back. Like, in your opinion, as you've had this great ladder you're climbing, the success that you're building, what is one or maybe a couple of calculated risks that you took along the way that really changed the game for ODC?
Oh, for ODC.
Or whatever you
Yeah,
want to
I
talk
mean,
about, GOBA? I don't know.
Or you,
Are
right?
you
Like,
personally?
what was the game changer? Like, was it stepping out to ODC to do it, or was it something inside ODC? Like, what took you from the warranty guy at Lennar to, the acquisition, one event for it? Risk.
yeah, I mean, I guess there's a couple of events. Generally, I think in life for anybody, the biggest risks you take are when your back is against the wall, right? And so for me, when the industry kind of crashed down and we were doing all kinds of layoffs, I was a VP of operations at the time, and all of the builders had to kind of impair their land, and my bonus was really tied to the to profitability. And so when they impaired their land, it wiped out my bonus, and it just sort of put me in a spot where my opportunity cost to take a risk to go out into kind of the to the business world was at its all-time low. Because at some point, if you're with your family, you're making enough money and that you kind of can't take risks. And so the crash, while it was devastating and I lost a lot, it sort of took my risk factor down to a point where it was just worth taking a chance on kind of going out into the industry. And so that's how I ended up kind of, I mean, there's way more to it, but that's how I ended up sort of taking that sort of risk. And had I not done that, I think I would have been fine. I would have worked for a builder for a while and everything would have been great. But in general, to sort of earn a little bit more, equity in a company is just one of the ways to sort of get to a little bit more. I don't know if it's freedom, because I don't feel like I'm free. I work constantly, but like, it's just more like that, where it's more about what you're doing. But, at ODC, risk wise, the biggest risk for me really is when I started to like let go, like let my team, like, let it not be all about me, right? So because I had some great positions at builders during the boom, I ended up it just turned out that the positions I ended up hiring a ton of kind of young people. I sort of carried forward the same thing that got me in, and so I hired a lot of young talent during the boom. And then when the market started to kind of rebound, a lot of those people ended up with jobs of influence. And so I had it was almost like I planned my career knowing I was going to go to ODC, and I didn't. And so ODC started to grow quickly because I had a lot of relationships with people that had influential positions. And so that first sort of 20 million to 150 million was really due to a lot of the relationships I had. But there had to be a time where it wasn't just about my relationships, where I wasn't just holding on to them so that I would have some sort of critical importance and so that everything was flowing through me. Like we had to kind of get to a point where I believed in my team enough that they could start to have those relationships and they could start to have some of the authority and the responsibility. And really that would be the biggest risk, because that would mean I'd start to be less and less important, or less and less of the thing had to kind of revolve around me. And so if I had to guess, that was kind of the risk, or it was sort of the mental kind of thing that I had to do. And there are little strategies that we've done along the way, but that would be, I guess, what I would call the biggest risk that allowed ODC to sort of bloom. And I'm proud to say that, the management team I have at ODC, in which we're, coming close to $500 million, is very similar to the management team we had in 2011. There are a lot in 2012. I mean, we have tons of 12 and 13-year employees, and almost I think of the kind of what I would call the 40 leaders at ODC. I think 30 of them have been there 10 plus years. And nice. So we didn't go out and get, some guy from IBM when we got bigger or something like that. So.
So what do the next 3 to 5 years look like with ODC? Now that Synergist is in the picture with you, what is your thoughts for the next several years?
Yeah, I mean, they don't look a lot different. I mean, I'm a little more financially secure, and that's nice, but I'm not done, and I like to work, and I want to kind of see what ODC can be if from a company that starts to kind of acquire and bring other people into our integration. So I think you'll see ODC growing the same way it has grown, through providing a solution to the builders on their capacity or price, whichever is the most important to them. And then I think that will continue. You'll start to see over the next few years us folding some different trades or scopes, as people call them, and integrating them into our system, and seeing if we can kind of be even a more solutions provider by offering different scopes. But people say, well, how long do you have to stay now that there's an acquisition? I haven't ever. I actually don't know the answer to that, because I'm not looking at it like that, and the people I'm working for I like, and I'm still kind of wanting my team to have success. And so, if there's a world where ultimately ODC could go from a $20 million per year revenue company to $1 billion, that'd be something cool to say I did, I guess, or whatever. But other than that, I mean, but what would be most cool is the amount of lives that would be affected along the way. Because at when you get to be this size of a company, your primary expense is your payroll, right? Compensation and benefits. And so when you start to really look inside that number, and everybody that compensate, because you're looking at two numbers, right? You want your sort of profit, but that compensation and benefits, that's representing all your employees' lives spinning around. It's the vacations, it's it's them sending kids to college, it's the going out to eat. Like that line item is an expense in most companies, but it's how the world works. And so the bigger you can get that line item, and the more people that can kind of like spin their lives around and think that they're doing a little bit maybe better than they would if they were anybody else, that's what I'm about. I guess. I don't know. You said that. Yeah, I'm not going to. I don't want that on video that I said that.
All right, so let's go. The last segment of today's interview is going to be rapid fire lifestyle things. So like not the business compartment as much. So how do you unplug at the end of the day, end of the work day?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I golf. I have friends. I have my family. All the normal things. I work a lot though. I enjoy working. I enjoy the sort of back work of kind of understanding the business. And so a lot of times I unplug by trying to understand the business, and everybody will kind of say that that's not healthy or whatever, but it's what I do.
It's your hobby as well, which is just fine. That's an answer. Next is one tool or piece of technology that you can't live without.
Excel.
Okay, great answer. And then
I witnessed that, by the way, Ryan. That's what I'm telling you about. I have seen that live.
and last one is leadership in 6 words or less.
Trust.
All right.
One word.
I like that. I like that. Well, I mean, Tony, today's been awesome. Great interview. Thank you so much for coming on. And great story. Awesome success. Wish you continued success. Thank you for being a member of the Florida Home Builders Association. And we really appreciate you coming on. So
Awesome. I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you for all the
Tony,
kind words.
thanks
All right.
for making the time. You know how much I appreciate you. Keep up the great work. We're happy to be a client and looking forward to more projects to come together.
Awesome.
And that's a wrap on this episode of The Build Up, brought to you by the Florida Home Builders Association. Keep the conversation going, and we'll catch you next time.